Hello and welcome back to Joline Knits a Lot. This is my show about knitting. Mostly this week it's knitting. Sometimes there is crochet, sometimes there is embroidery, sometimes there is weaving, sometimes there is cocktails. Those are the good times, I'll be honest. I do like a cocktail. Hello and welcome back. How are you doing? It's been a couple of weeks since we last spoke, and most of that time I have spent in an extreme cold warning here in Edmonton, Alberta. As you know, the polar vortex has descended and it's really cold here. It's been about minus 29 for a high most days. That translates to really cold. If last time I think I was telling you that it was so cold that your nose hairs were freezing. Well, now it's like if you go outside, your breath will steam up your eyelashes and they will freeze. So that's where we're at here. We've been driving our kids to school. I guess we should try and harden them up a bit, but you know, frostbite is a real concern and they are actually pretty grateful for the lift. And we've been mostly just spending time inside. Not that there's really anywhere to go. We're in a pandemic, but somehow it feels worse when the weather's really miserable outside. I am looking forward to things warming up a little bit, and next week I think they should be getting a little bit better. So that's exciting. So just shut my hair for you today. How have you been doing? What's new in your neck of the woods? I talked to my mom the other day and she said, you know, I don't have any news. We just keep doing the same things over and over and there's nothing to tell you. And I feel like this past week there hasn't been much to tell you either. However, we reached 100 subscribers not too long ago, and as you know, there was a prize which I will be announcing at the end of this episode, but I'm really happy to welcome a number of new subscribers to the channel. I hope that you're here to stay. I hope that you find something that you like here. I know that a lot of the new subscribers left comments that they were either new to knitting or were mostly crocheters, which I think is really interesting. Thanks for joining me and welcome. Today we're going to be mostly talking about knitting, but I think next week or next episode I'll give you an update on how my granny stripe blanket is coming along. Just a little crochet shout out to those crocheters. But thanks for joining me. Pull up a chair, pull up something cozy to drink, maybe something warm, or a cocktail if that's your bag. Bring your knitting or your crocheting or your cross stitch, your embroidery, or whatever it is you're working on. Or if your hands need a break, then just let them rest and enjoy a little chat about crafts. Today I am wearing my, I can't remember the original name for it. I'll have to put it on the screen here. I can't remember it. It's the Flea Cardigan. It's a pattern by Pinaguri. It was a pattern that a lot of knitters were knitting a couple of years ago, and I totally jumped on the bandwagon. I'm going to zoom in for you to see the color work here. This pattern calls for a number of different colors, and so I had a bunch of colors that I liked on hand. I had part balls from this and that, and I'd picked up a couple balls of different things. But it can be a little bit challenging trying to figure out how to arrange those colors in your colorwork knitting. So what I did, instead of knitting up a billion swatches, I got my kids' crayons out. I did a quick sketch of the pattern on some, I think in my bullet journal, and I used the dots to sort of guide where how the pattern went. I drew out the chart for the yoke, which is not very wide because as with a lot of sort of traditional colorworks patterns, the repeats are really quite short. So maybe 6-stitch repeats, 7-stitch repeats. So I drew it out a few times and I took my crayons and I just colored randomly until I came up with a combination that I kind of liked. I veered off the track with this pattern in the sense that I think I added one extra color, and that extra color for me was the white. And I used it, I think, sparingly, but to a pretty great advantage. Actually, it's showing up quite nicely on the screen. I really like how the white is popping against this dark background here, and these tiny little pops of white in this gold background really make me happy. So this is the Flea Cardigan by Pinaguri. It is a pattern that's on Ravelry. It is a steeked cardigan, so I did in fact have to cut my knitting. If I show you the back side, you can see where I did a crochet bind off here along the steek in the gold colorway before cutting, just to stabilize my knitting. I knit this mostly in tuku fingering, which is a very rustic yarn. It has a bit of a bite to it. It's a little bit, like it's not super soft, but it is certainly very cozy. And I think I pulled out a couple of extra fingering weight yarns to add in as contrast. So most of this is tuku fingering. I used a bit of Pip color work. I think it's called Pip. And then I also used some Knit Picks palette that I had lying around. And when I pulled this out to put on today to show you and do over the podcast, I thought I'd really like to knit this again. I knit this. It was after Christmas a couple years ago, and I just loved it. It was such a great knit. It was really engaging. You knit the colorwork part, it goes super fast, and then you're just knitting the body, which also I think goes pretty quickly because you're adding these little dots, which is called a lice pattern or a flea pattern. So it does seem to knit up quite quickly because you've always got something on the go. And then when you get to the cuffs, there's a nice little sort of zigzag where I pulled in that gold color again. I really, really love this sweater. I have a couple of just plain gray or black dresses that I was wearing it over when I, kind of short sleeve ones, that I would put on for work. It's just as great over a baller t-shirt. So yeah, it's pretty great. And so I was thinking this morning as I was getting ready to podcast, maybe I should knit another one. And then I thought maybe I should knit one for my mom. And now I'm all full of ideas on knitting another flea cardigan. Watch this space. It probably won't be anytime soon. I have a lot of projects sort of lined up that I think I would like to get to. But I really enjoyed this pattern. If you're interested in color work, I would say maybe for even adventurous beginners, but I think it would help if you had a little bit of color work experience behind you before you started this yoke, and also a little bit of courage to, because you know that you will be cutting your knitting. But yeah, really like it. Glad I'm wearing it. Happy to be here. What else has been going on? The other thing I wanted to share with you before I kind of delve into the crafting is that this year I decided sort of on the spur of the moment to participate in the February challenge. This is a challenge that makers, people who use fiber or spin fiber, I suppose, crochet, knitters, all sorts of crafters are taking part of on Instagram. I think it was founded by Creative Cece. She puts out a list of prompts for a photo every day that you post to Instagram. So sometimes it's a selfie to introduce yourself, sometimes it's what you're working on, sometimes it's what color are you liking, or what were you doing last year, that sort of thing. So if you would like to, I guess, maybe learn a little bit more about me, maybe you don't, consider this carefully. I am taking part in this challenge over on Instagram. On Instagram, my handle is JOLINEVMK, which stands for Joline V, that's me, Master Knitter, because I am a Master Knitter. Have I told you that story? A number of years ago, this was like 10 years ago, a really good friend of mine was moving literally to the other side of the world. She was moving from Edmonton, Alberta to Perth, Australia. And she said, why don't we do the Master Knitter program? It's something we can do together, like we'll be doing it together but apart. So I was like, okay, I guess. So I started. The Master Knitter program is through the Knitting Guild of America. It consists of 3 levels. The first level, or every level, you knit some swatches to show how you knit. Each swatch shows a different skill or technique. You have to answer some questions, describe what you're doing, and as the program advances through the levels, you have to start writing some very simple patterns. And then the thesis, if you will, is to knit a hat and a sweater that you have designed yourself. One of them has to be a colorwork design, and one of them has to be a cabled design. So I completed all of that, I think, in the fall of 2014, and so now I'm a master knitter. It was a really interesting program. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about why you might do the things you do, or the sort of rationale behind different techniques. It was really interesting, and it's given me confidence to move forward in knitting, writing patterns, teaching, that sort of thing. So if you're sort of on the fence or interested, I would recommend it. I learned a lot. That was a lot of blather. Let's get to some actual crafting. So I have finished a few things this week that I'd like to share with you. And the first one is a Plaidtastic Scarf, another Plaidtastic Scarf. There won't be any more Plaidtastic Scarves in my near future, but this one, I used the French Vanilla in the Spun Cloud yarn from Knit Collage. This one I used a mini set of blues. And as you can see, oh, look at that sequin. There's all sorts of fun things in this yarn. It is a fun knit. Look at that red. I love that color pop of this sort of cerise almost color against the blue and the white. So much fun. There's Daisy. This pattern, again, uses minis with all sorts of different yarns. Here's that cotton tape one. And again, it's a joy to knit. It knits up quickly on size 12 millimeter needles. Bam, there's the pom-poms. Oh, that one's... yes, fun pom-poms at the end. This one is a gift. Again, I really enjoyed knitting it. It was a really quick knit, but lots of fun. You do have to pay attention a little bit, because you have to know when you're making these little slipped sort of stitches that represent the plaid sort of look. Oh my goodness, it's fluffy yarn. But I'm really happy with it, and this will be a gift that will be going out sometime in the next little bit. So then when I was finished that scarf, I did have some leftovers again, much like the first time I knitted that pattern. And so I whipped up another hat. The first hat, this is the Plaidtastic Hat. It's available on Ravelry. It's a free pattern. You just have to sign up and it gets emailed to you from Knit Collage. So this hat, again, I used up all of the tiny little scraps of the yarn that I used in the scarf. Again, I used the the Knit Collage Spun Cloud. And I'm really happy with how this hat turned out. The first time I knit this hat, I knitted on size 12 millimeter needles. This time I knitted on size 12.75 millimeter needles. Because I felt like the first one was fine, but it was, if anything, it was just a little bit snug. So I wanted it to be a slightly bigger hat. Oh yeah, this one definitely has got more room. Oh my goodness. There's a lot going on in this hat. I will say this, when you're in an extreme cold morning, a hat like this is what you need. It is super warm, it's quite thick, it's hardy. The pom-pom on the top, I really, okay, see, now we gotta fix our hair again. So much hair, sorry for all the hair attention this week. I had bought a bunch of pom-poms for hats. They were just sort of a batch of hats or pom-poms that I got, I think from Amazon. They have a snap, so you can switch pom-poms on your hats if you want. You just have one end of the snap sewed onto the hat, and the other end is in your pom-pom, and then you can just switch them if you want. But when these pom-poms come to you, they're kind of deflated somewhat. And so I learned the trick that if you just take a hairdryer to these acrylic pom-poms and give it a good blow dry, a nice blowout, if you will. I got my 14-year-old daughter to do it. I think she did a great job. It's much perkier now and much more fuzzy and really fun. So if you have some polyester pom-poms that are lying around and that are looking a little bit dejected and sad, maybe they just need a blowout. So get out your blow dryer and just give them a little bit of attention and love, and they will perk right back up. So there's my Plaidtastic hat. Again, this hat is from Knit Collage. The pattern's free on Ravelry, and I just use leftovers from my other projects that I've been knitting from Knit Collage yarns. It's super bulky yarn, so if you have some super bulky lying around, I think this would be fabulous if you are a spinner and you have some really bulky yarn that you have spun. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Yeah, I wish I was a spinner. Sometimes, well, okay, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I wish I was a spinner because I think that hand spun yarn is beautiful and I would love to work with it, but I don't need another craft that takes time away from all the other crafts that I've been doing. So I'm, as you can imagine, somewhat torn. Really, I think that I just want to be best friends with someone who spins yarn and gives me their yarn, and then I could knit that yarn and keep some of it and give some of it away. That's my ideal. Call me. Okay, so the other thing that I knit up this week, or finished this week, was a pair of socks. Now, my youngest daughter, who you have heard about, wore through a pair of socks that I had knit her. That's not a big deal. I kind of like when I wear through a pair of socks because I feel like those socks have lived their best life. They have fulfilled their purpose in keeping my feet warm, and now they can go to their final resting place, and I can pull another pair of socks out of my my sock box. I have a box of socks that sits under my bed with all of these socks that I have knit, but I don't have room for in my actively wearing sock drawer. So I have all these extra socks, and they come in handy sometimes when you need a little pick-me-up gift for someone, or if you'd like to, or if you wear a hole in your socks. So I just have a stash of socks that are just sitting around for a rainy day. So she's worn through these socks, and she was a little bit sad because she really liked those socks, and they were pretty nice. They were kind of a cream color with flecks of gray and tan, and it was odd that the way that they wore out, because she hasn't been wearing them for that long. But I'm sorry, I kicked you again. Regardless, they wore out. They had several holes, and I said, "Don't worry, I will make you another pair of socks. Let's go down to my yarn stash. You can pick up some yarn, and I will whip up some socks for you." I did take the opportunity to remind her that if I had a circular sock machine, I could crank out some socks and have those socks to her in like a day. I definitely got the side eye, and I believe there was some eye rolling. It's true though, I could have cranked out a pair of socks for her. In the end, I hand knit her a pair of socks. She chose some sock yarn that I had lying around. It was left over from another project, I think. This is Mondim from Rostazuria. I'm sure I said that wrong. This is a sock yarn. It's from Portugal. It's a very like rustic, but it feels like a really hardy sock. This is like the salt and pepper colorway. I just whipped up two very, very plain stockinette socks for her. So I'll be giving those to her later today. And I think that these are going to wear pretty well because they're very sort of, they almost feel like a working sock in the sense that they're quite densely knit. And those are just a very plain pair of socks. I knit my socks on 2.25 millimeter needles. That's just the sort of needle size that I've learned that I like. I like the fabric that I get from most sock yarns. But yes, investigations continue into the 3D printing of a sock machine. When there is some actual progress, I will let you know. But I am interested, so watch this space. So having finished those sort of bigger projects, I cast on a couple of new projects this week. And the first one is a sweater. This might get complicated because there's a lot of yarn dangling off of this thing. Okay, so this is the Selly sweater. I know I've talked about this before. Let me just try and get this into a shape where I can actually show you what's happening. All right, let's go with this. Ooh. So this is the Selly sweater. This sweater was featured in the most recent issue of Lane magazine. It is a pattern by Alex Bird. It features a Lithuanian or Estonian, I will make a note here, technique of doing color work. So I'm not knitting that color work. If you look, it's sort of a woven technique. So I just started on I just stopped knitting on the body to work on a sleeve. I've recently discovered that I like to get the sleeves out of the way when I'm knitting a sweater. So what I did with this one is I knit the yoke, and then I just finished off. I had like a half a ball of yarn, so I kept knitting on the body until I had knit I knit the rest of that ball, which ended up being a few inches past the armhole. And then I started working on this sleeve. So as you can see, I sort of have quite a bit going on. This isn't like mindless knitting. You do have to pay attention to what you're doing. Just in the sense that when you come around to this side of the sleeve, you have to work this woven chart, which actually I think is looking really good on screen. I'm enjoying this knit, but it is a little bit fussy. Each of these little woven sections is actually 2 strands of that yarn. So when I started knitting this sweater, I discovered that I was having a hard time managing 2 balls of one color, 2 balls of another color on each sleeve cap as I was starting it. And so I discovered that if I put two balls in a little Ziploc bag, it would at least keep those 2 balls together and contained. And while it's not a fancy trick, it's certainly working well for me for this project to keep the yarn contained. When I knit color work, I don't have this issue because I use both my hands to knit color work, and so the colors stay separate and don't get twisted. With this technique, I'm still learning how to manage my yarn and not have twisting or the yarn sort of getting tangled around each other. But I am finding that because I have to use 2 strands of each color at a time, keeping the 2 balls together in a little Ziploc bag like this is actually working quite well. And then I just zip up the top of it and leave the yarns to kind of peek out the top, and that seems to be working okay. As I said, I've only just gotten to the point where I'm working on one of the sleeves. And again, this woven motif or chart is really interesting and beautiful. I'm finding that I have to keep my floats or these woven sort of sections quite loose, or else it puckers in the stitches that they're being woven around. So if this is something that you want to tackle or are interested in, I would suggest just being a little bit loose with those floats. Again, I mean, that's something that I tell people when I'm teaching color work knitting too. Looser floats are better. With this technique, I'm trying to do that. I feel like the motif for the most part is coming out quite nicely. This is my first attempt at this technique, but it's really interesting and it's nice to try something new. The yarn that I'm using is Sheepy's Metropolis. Yay! It turns out that this yarn is really great for sort of color work and sweater knitting. Who knew? Okay, so the yellow, the colors I chose were mostly based on the Pantone colors of the year this year, which are yellow and gray. So I'm doing a grello. The yellow is called Alexandria. This light blue or gray is my favorite Warsaw colorway, and then this deep steely gray is Miami. These are leftovers. I mean, I always have some Warsaw lying around. How often does one say that? This Miami is left over from some of those spark socks that I was knitting. prior to Christmas. And it's going a little bit slowly because I really do need to be able to focus on what I'm knitting while I'm knitting it. But my plan for this sweater is to just knit the first sleeve, knit the second sleeve. The good thing about me and knitting sleeves is my arms are kind of short, which makes it hard for me to reach things, but it makes it quicker to knit sleeves. Fun fact. So then once I finish my sleeves, I'm going to knit the collar or the neckband of this sweater and get that out of the way. And then it will just be smooth sailing straight. Oh, this is not. It's so gapey because you just cast it on and then all of this is curling. Once I get a neckband on it, it will sit so much nicer. So I'm looking forward to doing that neckband to see what it looks like. And then it'll just be straight down the body to my preferred length. This is a crop sweater. I will probably knit it a bit longer than cropped. And then there is some detailing at the bottom in the ribbing that I will be knitting, and then I'll be finished. So I am sort of looking forward to making some progress on this sweater. It is interesting to knit, but at the same time I am looking forward to getting to the point where I can do the neckband, which will be interesting and short, and then smooth sailing on the body until the end. So that is the Selly sweater, or Sealy sweater, S-E-L-I. It's in the most recent issue of Lena magazine. The pattern is by Alex Bird. And it's a really fun knit. And so I have one last project that I've been working on. This is a project that has been on my mind for a little while. I've had the yarn lying around at least since the fall, all of the yarn that I need for this project since the fall. And it's just has never really been the right time to cast it on. But finally this week I was like, you know what, that's exactly what I want to knit. So I have started the Birds of a Feather Shawl. Oh no, I'm mid-row. Don't you hate it when podcasters say that? Okay, I'm going to knit and talk to you, just like we're at the coffee table, until I get to the end of the row. So this is a pattern by Andrea Mowry. It was in one of the very early Lane magazines. Look at that, I'm only knitting Lane magazine patterns this week. That's interesting. It's something that I've had, when the magazine came out, I really liked the pattern. It is contrasting or alternating sections of garter stitch and mohair. Now, I'm not really a mohair kind of girl. I find mohair itchy. I don't think I'm the only one. I know a lot of people really love mohair, but it's just not for me. And I sort of had ruled out those fuzzy yarns in my head until one day I was at my local yarn shop. I was at the Fiber Nook here in Edmonton, and one of the owners, Roz, was wearing a beautiful Love Note sweater, and I was asking her about it, and she said that she had used a Surrey alpaca silk as an option to the mohair, and that really opened my eyes to this alternate fiber to mohair. Now, mohair is beautiful, but I do find it toothy and itchy for me. But I don't find the same with alpaca. Here's the yarns that I've been using. Okay, we're totally at the point where this shawl looks like a uterus or a thong. Your choice. Yes, if I just put the balls here, they could be the ovaries. Anyway, this fiber right here is a Surrey alpaca silk. And a lot more dyers are using this base as an alternative. The first project that I used it for was my very first Love Note sweater. I held some Surrey alpaca silk together with a very plain base that was, I think, BFL. Anyway, I really, really like the fabric that I got. It's soft, it's really warm, it's also really lightweight. And so I swapped out the mohair for this Surrey alpaca silk. The yarns that I'm using are La Bienna May Merino Single. This was a yarn that I purchased, again, a long time ago and I had in my stash. It was from the Tits Out Collective, if you remember that initiative. It was sort of started as a way of, by one dyer, as a way of raising money for women's businesses or women's initiatives. And that was something that I felt strongly about. So I purchased a couple of skeins from a couple of dyers, to just knowing that a portion of any sales of those colorways was donated to women's funds. Each dyer chose a women's initiative in their area. And so I chose this yarn from La Bien Aimée. Now when I got it, as you can see, it's like got sort of like apricot, again, sort of a cerise or cherry kind of a red color, and then a really deep purple. I got 2 skeins. And as you know, hand-dyed skeins can be very different, and these 2 are. This one has a lot of that sort of the deeper colors and the deep purple, and this one has very little of that. And I was sort of wondering how I was going to marry these 2 skeins, which are the same colors but not the same. And how was I going to make that work in one project? Well, as I was looking at this or birds of a feather shawl, it turns out that the alternating merino or fingering weight sections alternate between a garter stitch and a lace pattern. And so what I thought I would do was have all of the garter sections done with this yarn with the deeper purple, and then any of the lace patterns I would use this skein, and that way it would still go, but it would maybe make a little bit of sense that the lace was slightly different in coloration than the garter stitch section, and then I would have an opportunity to use both skeins and hopefully a somewhat similar quantity of both skeins. Now the fingering weight yarn is alternating also with this Surrey Alpaca silk, which I'm using. This is a color called Ballet Slippers. It is dyed by a local to me dyer called Lillian Pine. She's from Calgary, Alberta, which is again like 3 hours south of me. And I actually had the chance to meet her at a show in Vancouver. The dyer was lovely, so was her husband. Anyway, so here I am. I've only just started. I've done a couple sections. I'm still only on the garter section. The next time, so once I complete this section, there will be more mohair and then a lace section, and that's when I'll alternate the fingering weight yarns. I'm hoping that will be a good use of this yarn, in the sense that it will be hopefully cohesive, and also it will add to the difference between the garter sections and the lace sections. And I think that this will be a really nice springy kind of a shawl. I do find that where I live, scarves are a really great accessory to have in cool mornings as I'm walking to my office when I'm not working from home, or in air-conditioned areas, or if I'm watching my kids play soccer on the soccer pitch. It's just nice to have as an added layer if it's getting cool in the evening or in the mornings. And I think that this will be a nice sort of lightweight summer accessory. Now, this shawl is going to be huge. The pattern says that the finished object is something like 101 inches wide. So it's going to be huge. It'll be the kind of thing that you wrap around your neck a couple times. But I'm looking forward to working on it. I think it'll be a nice alternative to the color work from the Selly sweater, in the sense that a lot of this shawl is just garter stitch with those occasional lace sections, which I think are a pretty straightforward lace. And that is all the things that I am working on this week. I had one more thing I wanted to share with you, and that is a book recommendation. This is a book that I just finished the other day. It's called The Power of Knitting. This is a book by Loretta Napoleoni. I'll put her name right there if you're interested. And it's called The Power of Knitting, Stitching Together Our Lives in a Fractured World. This book is an interesting sort of take on the role of knitting through history. the author has some really interesting insights into the economics of knitting and the gender roles of knitting, the role of knitting in politics through history. And there are some fun patterns at the end. Again, sort of related to politics or historical events. So there is a pussy hat pattern. There is also some World War I and World War II service socks, which is sort of an interesting, I think, a sort of role of knitting as supporting of soldiers of war is a pretty common common story. But her take on it is a little bit interesting, just from her family's history perspective. There's a bikini, and I won't lie to you, I was looking at this bikini and I thought, actually, I think that bikini might fit me, but I require a lot of support, and I don't think a knitted bikini is going to work for me. However, I did look at it. There's a poppy, which I think actually would be something nice to knit, because I struggle with the poppies that you buy in November being very pokey, and I'm always losing them, and a knitted one might be a nicer, more permanent addition to my November wardrobe. And there's a little heart at the end. So there's lots of stories, lots of interesting takes, lots of interesting insights into the role of knitting, both in the author's personal life and through politics and economics, which I think is really interesting. So if it's something that you might be interested in, I say pick it up. I'm pretty sure I got my issue from Amazon, but you may be able to find it at a local library or at a local knitting shop. So that was a lot to share with you this week. And I'm sure you're all waiting for one last thing, and that is I'd like to announce the winner of my 100 subscriber giveaway. As you know, I had offered this giveaway to celebrate having so many of you sharing your time with me, and as ever, I'm really grateful for all of you who stop by, who watch my channel, who leave a comment. I was really blown away by the diverse knitters and crafters who left messages on my giveaway video. I think it's really interesting to hear where people are from and to hear what you're making and to be inspired by the things that other people are making. I was really interested to hear how many of you are knitting or crocheting blankets or hats or clothes for others to give away, for either people who are sick or people who are in need, and I found that really, really inspiring. So thank you knitters, for inspiring me to think more about how can I incorporate knitting for others into my my crafting. So that is something that I've been thinking about, and I think that I will I'll let you know where I end up on that. But I do have some thoughts, especially as I sit in an extreme cold warning environment. I do think that there is more that I could be doing to be knitting for others. And so thank you, knitters and crocheters, for inspiring me. So the prize for this giveaway is a skein of mustache sock yarn in the Woodstock 50 colorway, and an accompanying skein of Sheepy's Metropolis in the Warsaw colorway, the most perfect gray, in my opinion, and a really nice pair. The winner, as chosen by a random number generator, is Linda Bartles. Linda, congratulations. I can't wait to see what you make from this beautiful pairing. I'm going to leave an email for this podcast in the show notes below. It's jolineknitsalot@gmail.com. Please contact me with your address. Please contact me with your mailing address, and I will get this yarn out to you just as soon as I can. So, I hope that where you are, the weather is not extreme. extremely cold or extremely hot. I hope it's just the way you like it. I hope that in the next couple of weeks you find time to do the things that you enjoy doing. I know I plan on knitting a lot. Thanks so much for joining me again today. I can't wait to join you again in a couple weeks to talk about all the things that I've been crafting. So bye, take care, and I'll see you soon.